Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another video. So I wanted to do a Sam Raimi, trilogy review. I also plan to do an Andrew Garfield, trilogy, not trilogy, but the two movies. I'm going to do a review of those two movies probably later on today. I most likely won't do a Tom Holland one just because there's kind of no point unless you guys really want that, but I don't really view it as necessary just because, I kind of reviewed them already. I gave my thoughts on them previously, and the movies are kind of still ongoing. He still is the current Spider-Man, and obviously right now there's big rumors that Toby and Andrew are going to be in the movie come, when their movie releases on Friday. I'm seeing it tomorrow, so I'm really excited for that. I can't wait to actually watch this movie and just see the confirmation for myself. Don't worry, I'm not going to post any spoilers or anything like that, so you don't have to be concerned about any of that. However, after the weekend, I will be, not crazy spoilers. I'm not going to say, Tobey Maguire's return. Well, actually, that might be one I could do, because I imagine it's going to come out this weekend, and they might spoil it online and stuff. They might start to talk about it after the weekend, right? So I could totally see that being okay to talk about, but, if there's a big character death, I'm not going to put that in the title or anything like that. So, yeah, I'm really excited. I really can't wait for this movie, and obviously, if you are new here and you do want more Marvel content, or at least Spider-Man content, then make sure to be a subscriber. I was actually thinking about reviewing Hawkeye, but I've had really no interest in it. I tried to watch the first episode. It just it wasn't too exciting. And I know that there's some stuff that or at least it was teased in the recent one. At least I've been seeing it on Twitter, and that's cool and all, but that's not really enough for me to start watching it. It's honestly, as of now, I think my focus is really going to be on Spider-Man over the next week or two, I would say for sure. But let's talk about the Tobey Maguire movie. So, in my opinion, obviously, and I've talked about this before, Tobey Maguire is the best Spider-Man. A lot of it could be nostalgia. He was the first Spider-Man that I really ever knew. But I also think it's a little bit more than that. I think it's not purely just nostalgia. I really believe it's because he does emit the right emotion, I think, of what it takes to be a superhero and to be a true superhero, because I think Marvel, they have this formula to make everything way too funny. And it is funny, I will laugh, but they take a lot of that emotional element out of it. And there's no scene from what I can even think of in any of the MCU movies that even comes anywhere close to the iconic train scene with Tobey Maguire. And it's because it's not even necessarily the actions of what he did, even though that was intense and you could see the struggle of him actually holding that train, right, or the subway. It was mostly, what kind of came afterwards and the connection with the people and the people trying to protect him. It was a lot of that, and I think the Sam Raimi movies actually really execute that really well. And that's actually kind of one of my worries about No Way Home, is that if we do see Tobey Maguire in the movie, I hope that they don't make fun of him in that Marvel way, you know what I mean? If there's little jokes here and there, then whatever. I just really hope that the character feels the same, and they had that respect for the character instead of making everything a joke. The origin story for Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man was very different. Obviously, for the most part, it was the same as what we always knew. It was just different in the sense that they wanted the webs to be organic, which is very interesting. There's no use of the web shooters. I was so used to the idea of the web shooters just because when I was a kid, I watched the 90s Spider-Man, and obviously he has web shooters. And so I know when I first watched it, I didn't put two and two together until maybe a year later. And I was like, oh yeah, what the hell? It comes out of his wrists. And I imagine that is going to be something that they actually make fun of in No Way Home. But that's little things like that are fine. I just hope it's not too much. It's not overboard, right? Tonally, the Tobey Maguire movies, I think, are much more serious. And I think that's why they still hold up really well. I think certain Marvel movies, I don't want to say they're not going to hold up really well. I really don't want to say that because I've watched some older ones and they definitely still do. Because it's been done so much, it might actually get old. Not anytime soon, even though I do see that. I see a lot of people complaining about that Marvel humor, that it's just it's so obvious when they're about to do a joke and this and that. It's always the same type of thing, and so it's not as funny. I still think for the most part it is funny, but I can totally see in 10, 15 years it completely running dry, and in the future these movies won't be looked back on as being that great, especially when you compare it to Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, because his movies throughout the years have only gotten better and better in terms of just public opinion, right? Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn, it was so weird because back then I really thought it was weird casting. I thought, he doesn't look like the 90s cartoon Spider-Man. He, obviously like him and James Franco, they do work as like father and son, but it was really weird to see the casting like Willem Dafoe and James Franco as the Osborns, because it felt so just off. But obviously looking back at it now, it's like, no, that was so perfect. Like he is the Norman Osborn. I really feel like you can't recast that role because he was so perfect in it. And that's one of those things that I really hope that that doesn't happen in this new movie. I really hope that Norman Osborn doesn't die. I would like there to be a way where he could come back into some type of story, whether or not, Toby and them go back to their respective universes. Maybe he goes back to his universe, but Norman Osborn's also there. So we have, Norman Osborn is alive again. And maybe that can be the story of Spider-Man 4 or something like that. I think that could, I really believe that can be so great. And that's sort of, we'll talk about that near the end of the video here. I really do want to talk about Spider-Man 4 and the potential and what they could do here, because obviously they originally did have one planned, but that got canceled and they started to do the Garfield movies. But yeah, this story, I think the story of the trilogy, the Raimi trilogy, was really focused on what it means to be a superhero. And it had such a serious tone. Spider-Man 2, it's great. The train scene is obviously iconic, but it isn't my favorite of the Spider-Man trilogy. The hanging up the costume element is that makes sense. It's a lot of fun. It's cool to see him sort of give up being Spider-Man. He loses his abilities. Like, I really like that aspect to it. There's like a confidence thing there. He just kind of gives it up. It feels weird to do in your second movie, but it was totally different back then. I remember even back then, like announcing a trilogy, like there was no, I don't think anyone really thought we would get anything else. It was just like, okay, we're going to get that trilogy and that's it. And I'm not even sure if they actually announced it as a trilogy, because I was, I don't know, like what, 10, 11, 12 back then. So it's not like I used the computer a lot. Computers weren't, people had them, but like, I don't know, it wasn't social media, right? Social media wasn't really a thing back then. So I don't know if people knew that a trilogy was coming out, or if they just sort of announced the movie and then that one did good, so then they announced another one kind of thing. But Spider-Man 2, I think, is a really great movie. That train scene is definitely very iconic, but out of the three, I prefer the first one, mostly because of my memories connected with it. I still remember getting that Spider-Man bucket from the movie theater. I remember that scene with the Green Goblin's face. It scared the shit out of me. And I remember my dad taking me out of school to go watch the movie, being so excited for that. Honestly, the whole entire thing, I had so much fun, and it's one of my best, I guess, movie theater experiences of my life that I've experienced so far. So I'm always going to put number one ahead of all three of them. Now, in terms of the third one, I remember watching this one. I don't think I actually watched the second one in theaters, but the third one I remember watching. Eddie Brock, I actually didn't mind. I kind of prefer his story in this movie over Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock and just that Venom origin story. I just think that the Venom Tom Hardy is a little too comical. In the first movie, it wasn't so bad. The second one with Carnage got really bad, so I really wasn't a fan of that. But Topher Grace, I actually think works as Eddie. It's a little weird. I think it's kind of miscast, but I like the overall story. And maybe it's because I'm looking back on it and how long it's been 14 years. So it's been a very long time since that movie came out. But, like looking back at it now, the movie definitely is much better, I think, than a lot of people, I guess, gave it credit for back then, which I think is obviously understandable because the movie back then you're coming off of Spider-Man 2, and like I preferred 1, but like most people prefer 2. And so you have that high, right? Like you're going off of 1, which was, first of all, very successful. Everyone loved it. And then number 2 comes out and everyone's freaking out over that one. You're like, holy shit, like it's getting better and better. And then they go the route of 3 and they have 2 villains and I guess kind of 3 villains with Harry Osborn. And it really messed everything up. I really do believe in what Sam Raimi always said, Sandman should have been the only villain and the main villain, because his story actually was really great in that movie. Everything with Sandman was so great. And even, the stuff with Eddie Brock, you could definitely feel for him and how, Peter sort of treated him and this and that. But it definitely was one of those things where I think that should have been saved for a fourth movie where you could have did some like Venom stuff and then maybe mixed it with like Carnage and all of that. Spider-Man 3 was just so depressing. I still remember coming out of the theaters and being so depressed after watching that movie because those are on the same time that like Jack Sparrow died in one of the, I think it was number 2, or at least I thought he died back then. So I was all depressed about that. Everyone died in X-Men. So it was just like, okay, they're all my favorite movies that are out, these little universes that they kind of built up. They all suck now because all the cool characters are dying. Like, what the hell's going on? And I hated it because in Spider-Man 3, I was like, oh, Harry's dead. Peter and MJ are just like kind of in a weird place. It was such a dark tone. Everything felt so off after watching that movie that I was honestly pretty depressed about it. I was a teenager then, but I was pretty upset about it back then. And looking at it now, I can definitely appreciate the memes. You know, I love the Peter Parker dance scene. I love when he has the black suit. It's like the best part of the movie. I can also kind of get over Venom, though he's not necessarily Venom. Like, I would say he actually has a better look than the current Venom with Tom Hardy. Not in the actual, like, the size and stuff. I just mean, you know, he's not so glossy and just so, like, gooey and stuff. He's a little more just like, this is an actual suit, right? Because if you actually think of the Tom Hardy Venom, if that went on to Spider-Man, like, he's not going to have the black suit. It would just be like this black, like gooey costume over Tom Holland. So it's not exactly the same thing. But, you know, I mean, the movies are what they are. Tobey Maguire is my favorite Spider-Man, obviously. I think that when he does, and I'm really expecting him to show up in No Way Home, I hope he's handled really well. I'm going to find out in like 24 hours from now, actually. Yeah, 24 hours from now, I'll be currently watching it. And yeah, I'm really excited for that. I really hope it's good. And I hope that if he's in it, even if he goes back to his universe, like, do a Spider-Man 4. You know, I'm thinking of, like, from a studio point of view, if you're Sony and you're in the movie making business, it's so, like, obvious. You own the Tobey Maguire character. You own Spider-Man. You can do whatever the hell you want with Spider-Man. So make that Spider-Man. Even an Andrew Garfield movie, right? Like, do a number 3, do a number 4 for Spider-Man, bring back Sam Raimi for that movie. It would be very big, really big. And then Sony has like 2 movies that are going to be really massive because of the MCU. And I think it's so smart to do that. It would be insane for them to not do it right now, right? There's more hype for Tobey Maguire and Spider-Man in general than there was like 20 years ago. So like, I really hope that's their plan. I hope that gets announced this weekend because I'll definitely do a video on it. And yeah, you know, I wouldn't rate this as one of the best trilogies out there. Obviously, I still think Lord of the Rings as a trilogy is like the best trilogy of all time. But these movies are up there. You know, I think Tobey Maguire is going to be the fan favorite Spider-Man for years and years to come. Like, obviously, you know, like, Tom Holland's really great. Andrew Garfield's really great. They all bring a different aspect to it. I like them all, even though at certain points I didn't really like Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. But like, looking back at it, you know, I like them all. I really do. And I feel like there shouldn't be a lot of hate thrown towards like any of them because they're all Spider-Man. You know, they all gave us a lot of great memories. I think that you just kind of maybe you prefer one over the other. I just think that Tobey Maguire has that seriousness about him. It's not so like joke-like, and he's the original, right? He's the very first one. So anyways, I'm gonna leave it here. Definitely post your reviews down below. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in my next video, which should be the Andrew Garfield video.